The fluorescent lights hum with their familiar monotonous drone, casting harsh white light across the sterile corridors of the Riverside County morgue. Dr. Sarah Chen adjusts her lab coat as she walks through the basement hallway, her footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. The smell of disinfectant mingles with something else, something she's grown accustomed to over her 15 years working here. Death has its own scent, and after all this time, it's become as familiar as her morning coffee. Sarah pushes through the heavy steel doors into the main examination room. Banks of refrigerated units line the walls like giant filing cabinets, each one holding someone's final chapter. The temperature gauge reads 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Perfect. She's methodical about these things, always has been. In her line of work, precision isn't just important, it's sacred. The night shift is usually quiet. Most of the action happens during the day when the coroners perform their examinations and the paperwork gets processed. But Sarah prefers these late hours. The silence gives her time to think, to process not just the bodies that come through those doors, but the weight of what each one represents. Someone's father, mother, child. Someone who was loved, who had dreams, who left behind people who would never be the same. She checks her clipboard. 3 new arrivals today. An elderly woman who passed peacefully in her sleep at the nursing home. A construction worker who had a heart attack on the job site. And then there's John Doe, found unconscious in an alley downtown. The paramedics worked on him for 27 minutes before calling it. No identification, no family members frantically calling hospitals. Just another soul who slipped through the cracks of a city that moves too fast to notice everyone who falls behind. Sarah approaches refrigerator unit 12. The metal handle is cold against her palm as she pulls it open. The body bag slides out on its metal tray with a soft mechanical whisper. She unzips the bag partially, just enough to check the toe tag. John Doe, approximate age 35, cause of death pending autopsy. His face is pale, almost gray, with dark circles under his closed eyes. There's a small scar above his left eyebrow, probably from childhood. She wonders briefly what story that scar might tell. The paperwork is straightforward enough. No next of kin to notify, no personal effects beyond the torn clothes he was wearing. She makes her notes and slides the tray back into the refrigerated unit. The heavy door closes with a definitive click. Another day, another life reduced to paperwork and a metal drawer. But as Sarah turns to leave, something catches her attention. A sound that doesn't belong in the sterile quiet of the morgue. It's faint, almost imperceptible. A soft tapping, rhythmic and deliberate. She stops, listening intently. The building is old, built in the 1960s, and it has its share of quirks. Pipes that clank, ventilation systems that wheeze, electrical components that hum at odd frequencies. But this is different. The tapping stops. Sarah shakes her head, attributing it to fatigue. She's been pulling extra shifts lately, covering for a colleague who's out on medical leave. The overtime pay is welcome, but the long hours are starting to take their toll. She's been hearing things, seeing shadows that aren't there. Classic signs of exhaustion. She returns to her desk in the corner of the room, a small island of warmth in the cold, clinical environment. Photos of her daughter Emma smile back at her from picture frames clustered around her computer monitor. Emma's graduation from high school last spring. Emma's acceptance letter to pre-med at UC Davis. Emma following in her mother's footsteps, though Sarah secretly hopes her daughter will choose a specialty that involves the living rather than the dead. The tapping starts again. This time it's unmistakable, and it's coming from the direction of the refrigerator units. Sarah's blood runs cold. In 15 years of working in the morgue, she's heard every urban legend, every ghost story, every tale of bodies that move or make noise after death. She's always dismissed them as the product of overactive imaginations and too many late-night horror movies. The dead don't tap. They don't move. They don't do anything except decompose according to predictable biological processes. But the tapping continues. Soft at first, then more insistent. It's coming from Unit 12. Sarah's hands shake as she approaches the refrigerator. Her rational mind races through possible explanations. Post-mortem muscle contractions. Gases expanding in the body cavity. Some mechanical issue with the refrigeration unit itself. There has to be a logical explanation because the alternative is impossible. She grabs the handle of Unit 12 and hesitates. The tapping stops. In the sudden silence, she can hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She takes a deep breath and pulls the drawer open. The body bag is moving. Not dramatically, not like something out of a movie. Just a subtle rise and fall, barely perceptible. But movement nonetheless. Sarah stumbles backward, knocking over a tray of instruments that clatter to the floor with a sound like breaking bones. Her rational mind screams that this can't be happening, that dead people don't breathe. But her eyes are telling her something different. She fumbles for her phone, hands shaking so badly she can barely unlock the screen. Should she call 911? The coroner? Security? What do you call when the impossible is happening right in front of you? The movement in the body bag becomes more pronounced. Sarah watches in horror and fascination as what she thought was a corpse struggles against the confines of the black plastic. The zipper, which she had only partially closed earlier, begins to work its way down as whatever is inside pushes against it. A hand emerges. Pale, thin, very much alive. Fingers flex experimentally, as if testing their own existence. Sarah's breath catches in her throat. She's witnessing something that shouldn't be possible, something that challenges everything she thought she knew about life and death. The hand is followed by an arm, then a shoulder. John Doe is sitting up in the body bag, moving with the slow, deliberate motions of someone waking from a very deep sleep. His eyes are open now, blinking against the harsh fluorescent light. They're brown, she notices. Warm brown, not the flat, lifeless color she's accustomed to seeing. He looks around the room with the confusion of someone trying to remember where he is. His gaze settles on Sarah, and for a moment, they just stare at each other. Two people caught in a moment that neither of them understands. John Doe swings his legs over the side of the metal tray. His movements are unsteady, like a newborn learning to walk. He's wearing only a hospital gown now, his original clothes having been bagged as evidence. The gown is too small for his tall frame, and it gaps at the back, but modesty seems to be the least of his concerns. Sarah finally finds her voice, though it comes out as barely more than a whisper. She asks if he's okay, if he knows where he is, if he remembers what happened. But John Doe doesn't respond. Maybe he can't hear her, or maybe he's still too disoriented to process language. He slides off the tray and stands on unsteady legs, using the wall for support. His eyes dart around the room, taking in the banks of refrigerated units, the examination tables, the instruments of death investigation. Understanding dawns on his face, and with it, a kind of primal terror. He's figured out where he is. He knows what this place is for. John Doe moves toward the exit with increasing urgency. His gait is awkward, like someone relearning how to use their body, but his purpose is clear. He needs to get out of this place of death, needs to put distance between himself and the metal drawer that nearly became his permanent home. Sarah watches him go, still too shocked to move. She should stop him, should call for help, should do something. But what? How do you explain to anyone that a dead man just walked out of your morgue? How do you file a report that reads like the plot of a B-grade horror movie? John Doe reaches the door and pauses. He turns back to look at Sarah one more time, and in that moment, she sees something in his eyes. Gratitude maybe, or recognition of the impossible situation they've both found themselves in. Then he pushes through the door and disappears into the maze of corridors beyond. Sarah is alone again with the fluorescent lights and the smell of disinfectant. But everything has changed. The familiar routine of her work, the predictable nature of death, the clear line between the living and the dead, all of it has been shattered by what she's just witnessed. She approaches Unit 12 and stares at the empty body bag. The paperwork on her desk still lists John Doe as deceased. The tow tag lies on the metal tray, abandoned. According to every official record, the man who just walked out of her morgue doesn't exist. Sarah sinks into her chair, her mind racing. She thinks about calling the police, but what would she tell them? That she lost a body? That the dead came back to life? They'd think she was having a breakdown, or worse, that she was covering up some kind of professional negligence. She pulls up John Doe's file on her computer. The details are sparse. Found unconscious in an alley on 5th Street around midnight. No identification, no witnesses. The paramedics' report indicates they worked on him for 27 minutes before declaring him dead. Cause of unconsciousness unknown. No obvious signs of trauma, no indication of drug use. Just a man who collapsed and stopped breathing. Sarah scrolls through the medical examiner's preliminary notes. No obvious cause of death. Body temperature consistent with recent death. No pulse, no respiration, no response to stimuli. By every medical standard, John Doe was dead when he arrived at the morgue. But people don't come back from the dead. It's not medically possible. The human brain can't survive without oxygen for more than a few minutes. After that, cellular death is irreversible. Sarah has seen enough bodies to know what death looks like, and John Doe had displayed every classic sign. She thinks about catatonic states, about cases where people have been mistakenly declared dead due to extremely slowed vital signs. But those are rare, and they typically involve specific medical conditions or drug interactions. John Doe's blood work had shown no unusual substances, no indicators of any condition that might cause such a dramatic slowing of bodily functions. The more Sarah thinks about it, the more impossible it becomes. And yet she can't deny what she saw. A dead man came back to life and walked out of her morgue. It happened. She was there. She witnessed it. Outside, dawn is beginning to break over the city. Sarah can see the first hints of gray light through the small basement windows. Soon, the day shift will arrive. The coroners will come in, expecting to find John Doe ready for autopsy. What will she tell them? She considers her options. She could report exactly what happened and risk her career, her reputation, possibly her sanity. She could claim the body was picked up by mistake, transferred to another facility. She could say there was a paperwork error, that John Doe was never actually dead. But each of these explanations would require documentation, verification, a paper trail that doesn't exist. Sarah pulls out her phone and starts to dial the number for her supervisor, then stops. She's not ready for that conversation yet. She needs time to think, to process what she's experienced. She needs to understand what this means, not just for her, but for everything she thought she knew about the nature of life and death. The morning shift arrives with their usual bustle of activity. Sarah's colleague, Marcus, greets her with his typical cheerfulness. He's been working at the morgue for 8 years, long enough to develop the kind of gallows humor that helps people cope with constant exposure to death. He jokes about having to work on a Saturday, about missing his daughter's soccer game, about the coffee in the break room being strong enough to wake the dead. Sarah forces a smile, but the irony isn't lost on her. Marcus has no idea how close to the truth his casual comment really is. The day coroner, Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, arrives shortly after. She's a thorough, no-nonsense professional who's been doing this work for over 20 years. She's seen everything, dealt with every kind of death the city can produce. If anyone would believe Sarah's story, it might be her. But even Dr. Reeves would need evidence, and all Sarah has is an empty body bag and an incredible story. Dr. Reeves asks about the scheduled autopsy for John Doe. Sarah's mouth goes dry. She mumbles something about paperwork issues, about needing to verify the body's location. Dr. Reeves raises an eyebrow but doesn't press the issue. There's always paperwork to sort out, always some bureaucratic tangle to unravel. Sarah escapes to the break room, needing a moment to collect herself. The small room is decorated with the usual collection of motivational posters and safety reminders. A sign above the coffee maker reads, "Every body tells a story." Sarah stares at it, wondering what story John Doe's body was trying to tell. She pours herself a cup of coffee with shaking hands. The hot liquid scalds her tongue, but the pain is somehow reassuring. It's real, immediate, tangible. Unlike the surreal experience she had just hours ago. Marcus joins her in the break room, chattering about weekend plans and overtime pay. Sarah tries to engage in the conversation, but her mind keeps drifting back to Unit 12, to the empty body bag, to the impossible thing she witnessed. Her phone buzzes with a text message from her daughter Emma. "Just wanted to say good morning and thanks for working so hard to help pay for college. Love you." The message is a reminder of what's at stake. Sarah can't afford to lose her job, can't afford to be seen as unreliable or unstable. Emma's future depends on her mother's steady income and good reputation. But how do you go back to normal after witnessing the impossible? How do you file reports and follow procedures when the fundamental rules of existence have been turned upside down? Sarah returns to the main examination room, hoping to find some evidence of what happened. Maybe John Doe left something behind, some clue that would help her understand. But Unit 12 is exactly as she left it, empty, sterile, giving no indication that it ever held anything more than air. She checks the security footage, but the cameras in the morgue are old and the quality is poor. The angle doesn't capture the refrigerator units clearly, and the timestamp on the recording seems to be malfunctioning. Even if the footage showed something unusual, it would be difficult to make out any details. As the day progresses, Sarah finds herself going through the motions of her job while her mind remains fixated on the events of the night before. She processes paperwork, assists with examinations, maintains the equipment. But everything feels different now, as if she's seeing her work through new eyes. Every body that comes through the doors makes her wonder. How do they know for certain that this person is dead? What if the signs they look for aren't always reliable? What if there are states of being that exist between life and death, states that medical science doesn't fully understand? Dr. Reeves approaches her desk in the afternoon. She's holding a file, and her expression is puzzled. She asks about the John Doe case, about the discrepancy in the paperwork. According to the file, the body should be in Unit 12, but when she went to begin the autopsy, the unit was empty. Sarah's heart pounds as she struggles to formulate a response. She explains that there might have been a mix-up, that she's looking into it. Dr. Reeves nods, but Sarah can see the concern in her eyes. In a place where precision and accountability are paramount, bodies don't just disappear. The afternoon drags on with no resolution to the mystery. Sarah continues to field questions about John Doe's whereabouts, offering vague explanations and promises to investigate. But she knows that eventually, she'll have to provide real answers. The system demands documentation, accountability, a clear chain of custody for every body that enters the facility. As evening approaches and the day shift prepares to leave, Sarah volunteers to stay late again. She claims she wants to sort out the paperwork issues, to track down the missing documentation. In reality, she's hoping for another encounter, another chance to understand what happened. The morgue settles into its familiar nighttime quiet. Sarah sits at her desk, staring at the empty file for John Doe. She's written and rewritten her incident report a dozen times, but she can't find words that adequately describe what she experienced. Every version sounds like fiction, like the ramblings of someone who's been working too many late shifts. Around midnight, she decides to walk through the city. She needs air, space to think, distance from the sterile environment that has become her second home. The downtown streets are mostly empty at this hour, populated only by shift workers heading home and night owls just beginning their evening. She finds herself walking toward 5th Street, toward the alley where John Doe was found. She's not sure what she expects to discover there, but she feels drawn to the place where his story began. The alley is narrow, lined with dumpsters and fire escapes. Broken glass crunches under her feet as she walks deeper into the shadows. There's nothing here now, no indication that anything unusual ever happened. But as Sarah stands in the spot where John Doe was found, she can't shake the feeling that she's missing something important. Some piece of the puzzle that would help her understand not just what happened, but why. A homeless man emerges from behind one of the dumpsters, startling her. He's elderly, weathered by years of living on the streets. His clothes are tattered, but his eyes are alert, intelligent. He asks if she's looking for someone, and something in his tone makes her think he might know more than he's letting on. Sarah describes John Doe, the man who was found unconscious in this alley. The homeless man nods slowly, recognition flickering in his eyes. He says he saw the whole thing, saw the man collapse, saw the paramedics work on him. But then he says something that makes Sarah's blood run cold. He says he saw the man get up and walk away while the paramedics weren't looking. He says he tried to tell them, but they wouldn't listen. People like him, he explains, are invisible to most folks. Nobody believes what they see. Sarah stares at the homeless man, trying to process what he's telling her. If John Doe walked away from the scene, How did he end up in the morgue? How did he convince the paramedics that he was dead? The timeline doesn't make sense. The homeless man continues his story. He says he followed John Doe for several blocks, worried about his condition. But then something strange happened. The man collapsed again, right in front of the hospital. Different paramedics responded this time, and they pronounced him dead on the scene. According to the homeless man's account, John Doe died twice in the same night. Or appeared to die twice. The implications are staggering. What kind of medical condition could cause someone to repeatedly lose and regain vital signs? What could make someone appear dead to trained medical professionals on multiple occasions? Sarah thanks the homeless man and gives him some money for food. As she walks back toward the morgue, her mind races with new possibilities. Maybe John Doe suffers from some rare condition that causes periodic catatonic states. Maybe he has some kind of neurological disorder that affects his vital signs. Maybe there's a medical explanation for what she witnessed. But even as she tries to rationalize the experience, she knows it's not that simple. She's worked with enough medical professionals to know that paramedics are trained to detect even the faintest signs of life. They don't make mistakes about something as fundamental as death. Back at the morgue, Sarah pulls up everything she can find about conditions that might cause someone to appear dead. Catalepsy, catatonic stupor, locked-in syndrome, hypothermia-induced cardiac arrest. She reads case studies of people who were mistakenly declared dead, only to revive later. But these cases are extraordinarily rare, and they typically involve specific circumstances or underlying conditions that would show up in medical examinations. John Doe's preliminary examination had shown no signs of any unusual medical conditions. His blood work was normal, his organs appeared healthy, and there were no indicators of drug use or poisoning. By all medical standards, he was simply a healthy man who had died of unknown causes. Sarah's research leads her down a rabbit hole of medical mysteries and unexplained phenomena. She reads about cases of spontaneous revival after cardiac arrest, about people who have been declared dead only to show signs of life hours later. The medical literature is full of cases that challenge our understanding of the boundary between life and death. But none of the cases she reads about involve someone walking away from a morgue. None describe the kind of deliberate, conscious revival she witnessed. John Doe didn't just show vital signs. He woke up, oriented himself to his surroundings, and made a purposeful decision to leave. As the hours pass, Sarah finds herself wondering about John Doe's current condition. Is he somewhere in the city, confused and disoriented? Is he seeking medical attention, trying to understand what happened to him? Or has he simply disappeared back into the anonymity of urban life? She thinks about the look in his eyes when he turned back to glance at her before leaving. There had been something there, some kind of recognition or understanding. As if he knew that what had happened was impossible, but that it had happened nonetheless. The next morning brings a new set of challenges. Dr. Reeves is asking more pointed questions about the missing body. The hospital administrators want to know why there's no record of John Doe being transferred to another facility. The police are asking about the case, wondering if there's any connection to other mysterious disappearances in the area. Sarah finds herself at the center of an investigation she can't possibly explain. Every question leads to more questions. Every attempt at explanation only deepens the mystery. She's trapped between the impossible thing she witnessed and the very real consequences of a missing body. Marcus, her colleague, tries to lighten the mood with jokes about zombie movies and supernatural thrillers. But his humor only serves to highlight how surreal the situation has become. Real life doesn't work like the movies. Dead people don't walk away from morgues. Except, apparently, sometimes they do. The pressure mounts as the day goes on. Sarah's supervisor schedules a meeting to discuss the incident. The hospital's risk management team wants to review procedures and protocols. There's talk of launching a formal investigation, of bringing in outside experts to examine the facility's security measures. Sarah knows she's running out of time. Eventually, she'll have to provide a satisfactory explanation for what happened to John Doe. And the truth, the actual truth, isn't something anyone will believe. That evening, Sarah makes a decision that surprises even her. Instead of going home, she returns to the alley on 5th Street. She's not sure what she hopes to accomplish, but she feels compelled to retrace John Doe's steps, to understand his story from the beginning. She talks to more homeless people, night shift workers, anyone who might have seen something unusual. Slowly, a picture begins to emerge of a man who seemed to exist on the margins of society. Several people remember seeing him around the downtown area, always alone, always quiet. He never asked for money or food, never caused trouble. He was just there, a part of the urban landscape that most people learned to ignore. But everyone agrees on one thing: there was something different about him. Something that made him stand out even among the diverse population of people who call the streets home. Some describe it as a sadness, a weight he seemed to carry. Others talk about his eyes, how they seemed to see things that other people missed. An elderly woman who runs a late-night diner remembers him coming in occasionally for coffee. She says he was polite, soft-spoken, but there was something haunted about him. He never talked about his past, never mentioned family or friends. It was as if he had appeared out of nowhere and was just passing through. Sarah's investigation leads her to a pattern that's both fascinating and disturbing. John Doe wasn't the first person to be found unconscious in that alley. Over the past year, there have been several similar incidents. People found in the same location, in the same condition, with no obvious cause for their collapse. Most of these cases were dismissed as drug overdoses or medical emergencies. The individuals were typically treated and released, disappearing back into the city's shadows. But John Doe was different. He was the first one who was declared dead, the first one who made it to the morgue. As Sarah digs deeper into these cases, she begins to notice other patterns. The people found in the alley all fit a similar profile: individuals living on the margins of society, people with no fixed address, no emergency contacts, no one to ask questions when they disappeared. It's as if someone was specifically targeting the invisible population, the people who could vanish without anyone noticing. But targeting them for what? What could cause multiple people to collapse in the same location? What could make them appear dead to medical professionals? And why would John Doe be the only one to actually revive from that death-like state? Sarah's investigation takes on new urgency as she realizes she might be dealing with something more complex than a simple medical mystery. The pattern of incidents suggests intention, planning, possibly even criminal activity. But the nature of what's happening is so unusual that she's not sure how to report it or who would believe her. She decides to stake out the alley, to see if anything unusual happens during the night hours. She positions herself across the street, in the shadows where she can observe without being seen. For several hours, nothing happens. The alley remains empty except for the occasional homeless person seeking shelter or someone taking a shortcut between streets. But around 3 in the morning, Sarah notices something strange. A figure approaches the alley from the opposite direction, moving with purpose and determination. Even from a distance, she recognizes the silhouette. It's John Doe. He's returned to the place where his impossible journey began. He's dressed in different clothes now, street clothes that suggest he's somehow acquired resources since leaving the morgue. But his movements are the same as she remembers: careful, deliberate, as if he's still getting used to occupying his own body. John Doe enters the alley and disappears from Sarah's view. She waits, watching for him to emerge from the other end, but minutes pass with no sign of him. Against her better judgment, she crosses the street and approaches the alley entrance. The alley appears empty. There's no sign of John Doe, no indication that anyone has been there recently. Sarah walks the length of the narrow space, checking behind dumpsters and in doorways, but she finds nothing. It's as if he simply vanished. As she turns to leave, something catches her eye. A piece of paper tucked under a loose brick in the wall. She pulls it free and unfolds it, revealing a handwritten note in careful, precise handwriting. The note is addressed to her, though she never told anyone her name or her connection to the morgue. It reads simply, "Thank you for bearing witness. Some things cannot be explained, only experienced. The answer you seek lies not in what happened, but in why it was allowed to happen." Sarah stares at the note, her hands trembling. John Doe knows who she is, knows that she's been investigating his case. But more than that, he seems to understand the impossible nature of what occurred. The note suggests that his revival wasn't accidental, that there was some purpose behind it. But what purpose? And who or what allowed it to happen? The note raises more questions than it answers, but it confirms that Sarah's experience was real, that she didn't imagine or hallucinate the events in the morgue. Over the following days, Sarah finds herself caught between her professional obligations and her personal quest for answers. The investigation into John Doe's disappearance continues, but without any new evidence, it's beginning to lose momentum. The hospital administration is more concerned with preventing future incidents than with understanding what happened to one homeless man. But Sarah can't let it go. The note has opened a new line of inquiry, suggesting that John Doe's case might be connected to something larger, something that challenges fundamental assumptions about life, death, and the nature of human existence. She begins to research similar cases from other cities, looking for patterns of unexplained revivals or mysterious disappearances from medical facilities. What she finds is disturbing. There are dozens of cases that share similarities with John Doe's story. People declared dead who later showed signs of life. Bodies that disappeared from morgues and hospitals. Individuals who seemed to exist on the edges of society, only to vanish without explanation. Most of these cases were dismissed as clerical errors, security breaches, or medical mistakes. But taken together, they suggest something more systematic, more intentional. It's as if there's a hidden network of people who exist in the space between life and death, people who have somehow transcended the normal boundaries of human experience. Sarah's investigation leads her to academic papers on near-death experiences, consciousness research, and the medical definition of death. She learns about cases where people have been revived after extended periods without vital signs, their experiences challenging traditional understanding of what it means to be alive or dead. But even the most extreme cases in the medical literature don't match what she witnessed with John Doe. The revival she saw wasn't the result of medical intervention or technological advancement. It was something else entirely, something that existing science can't adequately explain. As weeks pass, Sarah finds herself changing. The experience has altered her perspective on her work, on life, on the nature of existence itself. She no longer sees death as the absolute end she once believed it to be. Instead, she's beginning to understand it as a transition, a boundary that might be more fluid than anyone imagines. Her relationship with her daughter Emma deepens as she struggles to process what she's experienced. During their weekly phone calls, Sarah finds herself asking different questions, showing more interest in Emma's studies of biology and medicine. She's looking for someone who might understand, someone who could help her make sense of the impossible. But she's careful not to share the details of her experience. Emma is just starting her medical education, and Sarah doesn't want to burden her with questions that have no easy answers. Instead, she guides their conversations toward topics of consciousness, the definition of life, the mysteries that still exist in medical science. Emma, bright and curious like her mother, picks up on the subtle shift in their conversations. She begins sharing research she's encountered about the boundaries between life and death, about cases where people have been revived after extended periods of clinical death. She's fascinated by the implications of what she's learning, the way it challenges everything she thought she knew about human biology. Through these conversations, Sarah begins to see her experience in a different light. Maybe what she witnessed wasn't supernatural or impossible. Maybe it was simply an example of phenomena that science hasn't yet learned to explain or categorize. Maybe John Doe represents a kind of human experience that exists beyond current medical understanding. This perspective gives her some peace, but it doesn't answer the larger questions raised by the note he left. Who is John Doe? Why did he seek her out specifically? And what did he mean when he wrote about things being allowed to happen? The answer comes 3 months after the initial incident, in a way that Sarah never expected. She's working a late shift, processing paperwork and maintaining equipment, when she hears the familiar sound of the loading dock door opening. A new arrival, probably another case that came in during the evening hours. But when she goes to receive the body, she finds something unexpected. It's John Doe again, apparently dead again, being delivered by a different set of paramedics from a different part of the city. The circumstances are eerily similar to his first arrival. found unconscious in an alley, no identification, no known medical conditions, pronounced dead after unsuccessful resuscitation attempts. Sarah stares at the body bag as the paramedics transfer it to her care. It's definitely the same person, though he looks different somehow. Older, more worn, as if the months since his first death have taken a toll on him. She signs the paperwork and watches the paramedics leave, her mind racing with implications. This isn't a coincidence. John Doe has returned to the morgue deliberately, seeking the same impossible revival he experienced before. But what is he hoping to accomplish? And what does his return mean for Sarah's understanding of what she witnessed? She processes the body according to standard procedures, but her movements are mechanical, automatic. Her real attention is focused on the larger questions raised by his return. Is this part of some cycle he's trapped in? Is he testing the boundaries between life and death? Or is he trying to communicate something that can only be expressed through this extraordinary process? As she places John Doe's body in the same refrigerator unit where she found him the first time, Sarah realizes that she's about to witness the impossible again. The thought should terrify her, but instead, she feels a strange sense of anticipation. This time, she'll be ready. This time, she'll have questions to ask. She settles in to wait, knowing that sometime during the night, death will once again prove to be less permanent than anyone believes. And maybe this time, she'll finally understand what John Doe is trying to tell her, what message he's carrying from the space between life and death. The fluorescent lights hum their familiar tune as Sarah prepares for another encounter with the impossible. Outside, the city sleeps, unaware that in a basement morgue, the fundamental rules of existence are about to be challenged once again. And somewhere in the space between heartbeats, between breath and silence, answers wait to be discovered. John Doe has returned, and with him, the promise of understanding something that exists beyond the boundaries of normal human experience. Sarah Chen, witness to the impossible, prepares to cross those boundaries herself, to follow the mystery wherever it might lead, even if that means questioning everything she thought she knew about life, death, and the nature of existence itself. The night stretches ahead, full of possibility and questions that have no easy answers. But for the first time since her impossible encounter began, Sarah feels ready to embrace the mystery rather than solve it, to accept that some truths can only be experienced, never fully explained. In the cold, sterile environment of the morgue, surrounded by the tools and procedures of death investigation, Sarah waits for life to assert itself once again in ways that defy all understanding. The impossible is about to happen again, and this time, she'll be ready to follow wherever it leads.